And now, the survival show that once survived a 15-hour road trip in the desert with just a nut chiller and the Jeep it was attached to. In this episode, your listener questions will be answered. We'll discuss hiding your preps, self-defense options for those with poor eyesight, short-barreled rifle questions, and probably one of the hardest questions any of you have ever asked me. Howdy and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 194. I'm your host Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today is going to be a listener question day, and listeners, if you want to participate in future listener question shows, just email questions at intherabbithole.com, and that'll come straight to me. It's not my normal email address, but that'll help me sort things so that y'all don't have to jump through any hoops or do anything weird, so that it sorts correctly on my end. Just questions at intherabbithole.com. This past time, we used both the In the Rabbit Hole Armada Facebook group, is where we did a lot of these questions, but we also did it on the main ITRH Facebook page. So in the future, we'll also do that in addition to making a post about it, in addition to y'all being able to just email in. I think we are going to make this a monthly piece of the show. We did the test last time, and people actually really seemed to enjoy it, and I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. Y'all seem to love it, so it's back, or it's going to stay, I should say. And let's lead off here, and I'm not going to read off people's full names, just their initials. And PT asked, what is the most overlooked survival prep you come across? My answer is water. By that, I mean one or more ways of procuring water, purifying water, sanitizing water, and storing water. This listener in particular understands this. He recently ran into the issue around water. And PT, I meant to ask you more about this when I saw you at the Houston ITRH Armada meetup. Please don't let me forget to ask you more about your experience during the upcoming virtual hang. JC asked, what skills do you practice most and what skills do you practice least? Why? He went on to ask, what one skill do you feel you need the most but have the least experience? JC, you are an ass for asking me this question. I had to really think about it. I can kill two birds with one stone here. The one I feel is the most important that I practice the least is medical skills. This is due to time and admitted laziness. Since my wife is a medical professional, we will leave it at that. And she also is a certified first aid and CPR instructor. I have a bad tendency of not giving it enough attention because she's got it all locked down. I do have my CPR and all that other fun stuff certifications. I go renew them every 2 years. I really should do it more often. And since I actually have an instructor here at home, I should take advantage of that and should run through those things with her on a much more regular basis. And of course, I would also love to go on and get like basic EMT training and some other things. But it comes down to, again, my own personal laziness and time. There's only so many things I can get done in a day, and I do a lot of different random things in a day. So that one falls by the wayside. The one I practiced most, I would say, is situational awareness. I think for most of my life, I've actually been a pretty aware person. And one of the things that, as a side rant, one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy is when you are walking towards another human being, like you're in a store or something like that, and they don't move or adjust their body. Like if you're walking down like tight aisles or something, and they don't move or adjust their body in any way, and they just stand there like a cow staring at whatever's in their hands with no sense that someone's around them. They don't kind of move. That drives me crazy. And it always has, even since I was a little kid. And so to me, that demonstrates a general lack of situational awareness by most people. They're just not paying attention. They don't innately look or even pay any attention at all to that another human being is approaching them. If somebody else is approaching me, I kind of want to know who it is and why it is. And it doesn't matter if I'm in an aisle or something. I still try to at least glance up and acknowledge people. I don't know what they're doing. They could be getting a can of soup off the shelf, or they could be coming to get a can of soup off the shelf and hit me in the head. Call me paranoid. I'm okay with that, but it is what it is. It's just, and also just in a general sense, most people are so oblivious. I've made fun of people in this show before. The people that will cross the street while text messaging or staring at their phone, not looking at traffic at all. That just begs to get run over by a car. The next one I would also say is followed by guns. Well, because I enjoy it. Probably too much time on guns. Not saying I've got mad ninja gung fu and that I can drop 22 caliber rounds into a coffee can at 100 yards with my eyes blindfolded and other nonsensical things and all these other braggadocious type stuff. So make no mistake about what I'm getting at here in my own personal abilities. I'm just saying it's the one I put the second most amount of time in because, well, guns. So there. Let's see. DB asked, what barrel length is your 300 Blackout SBR? The answer to that, I actually already answered this person at an ITRH Armada meetup, but thought it might be interesting for others to hear. And mine is 8.5 inches. Say that without chuckling. Some say this is the shortest a 300 Blackout barrel should be. Some say it's 9 inches. Others say it's 9.5 inches. I settled on 8.5 inches because A, I'm just not that worried about that extra half inch to inch. And B, that was the length the manufacturer I bought from made. They made an 8.5 and they made a 10.5. And I wanted the shortest thing they had that I thought would still produce the best results possible. If they'd had a 9 inch, I probably would have done that instead. But that was what they had. And I don't lose any sleep over that inch to half inch that other people spend lots of time. I can tell you they spend lots of time worrying about this because I've been to those forums because I asked the same question you did when I was first picking it out. And there is much to do about nothing when it comes to that, in my opinion. If I was going to do a top end rifle for a second one, I would do a Noveski in 8.5 inch. Or I would do a BCM in 9 inch, which is what they make. And my decisions there, it would be completely about availability of the rifle at the time at which I was ready to buy something. That's how it would sway me which maker. My first choice would be a Noveski. My second choice would be a BCM. I think the difference between the two is most likely about as reasonable a discussion to actually get excited about as 8.5 versus 9 inches on a barrel length. Anyway, I hope that answers the question. DZ asked, if you live in an apartment or small home, how do you store your preps and keep them secret from prying eyes? And how do you keep them organized in a confined space? I'll have to ask Alana to come back and do an episode on this topic. I think that would be great. She'd answer this more completely than I'll be able to. So, Alana, expect a text message or email soon from me on the topic. I do have some advice around this. Actually, I probably have a fair bit of advice about this, I think. And here's my advice. 1, find hollow spaces in kind of funky areas or other out-of-the-way spaces in your home. That can be under the bed and using those rolling plastic bins that are specifically made for putting stuff under the bed. That's a pretty good one. I would go more towards the opaque plastic bins than the translucent, just because that should keep it completely out of sight, out of mind. Some larger pieces of furniture have cavities in them big enough to tuck some stuff away. Some couches do, not many, but some do. It just depends. We've actually got some furniture pieces around here. This is not how we store, but we do actually have some furniture pieces. Some of them are like TV stands and stuff like that that are meant to look like one big solid thing, but they're actually hollow. That would be a pretty decent place of sticking something. If it was something that you were going to store long term and didn't need to get to it quickly or anything like that, which is a lot of preps, is actually stuff that you're not going to be touching that often. So that's a pretty good thing. You can also put your preps up high or low. Just don't do it at eye level. This kind of goes back to situational awareness. People have a tendency to just see what's in front of their face without tilting their heads up or down. Most people are just not that observant. Most people are so busy being consumed with their own thoughts or whatever they're doing or whatever is going on in the world, and they just don't pay that close of attention. You can also simply just put them behind other things, like on a shelf. In our last house, we didn't have a pantry and really didn't have any closet space to speak of since the house was built in the 1930s. I think the house at one time did actually have a pantry, but my guess was that the previous owners of the home did a crappy remodeling job on the kitchen, and I think when they did it, they tore out probably what was the original pantry. Anyway, point to that is we didn't have any tucked away or out of sight, out of mind place to store things in the kitchen. And that was a big aggravation for me for a long time. To make up for this, what I did was I went out and I got a big wire shelf that sort of looks appropriate in a lot of kitchens. It's a little more commercial looking. I was okay with that. I don't think the wife liked it as much as I did, but it was what it was, and it worked. It was about 36 inch. It was a big shelf. It was about 36 inches deep, 9 feet tall, and 4 feet wide. It was on large wheels, which produced, and I also had set the bottom shelf up a little bit higher than normal. And that produced about a 10-inch gap, and we're back to the gaps again, under the shelf. I put a lot of ammo cans under there and pushed them far enough back that you couldn't see them unless you knelt down and really looked. Most people would have probably also had to have used a flashlight also to have really seen what was in there. I mean, they're ammo cans, they're dark green. They kind of tend to blend in dark areas, I found. And then on the bottom shelf is where we put our freeze-dried foods that come in the tub, like the Wise food storage stuff. And then I just put stuff in front of them. No, and nobody ever really asked about it. The only other thing that I did do was I turned them so that all the labels faced back, so that if I was taking things off of the shelf that was in front of them, it wasn't like an immediate thing of, oh, I've seen that on TV before. You've got, however many big tubs of food. It was just like there. And then I think the big thing here, the big takeaway for me, though, was that almost no one ever asked about or paid attention to that shelf. A few people did comment on it, and I would just say, yeah, the house doesn't have a pantry. And we also do bulk buying and buy 1 month at a time because I hate going to the store, and it's also cheaper, so we save a little bit of money. And that's kind of where the conversation would end. I didn't give people a tour of the home and say, here's this giant pile of prepper shit, and here's this giant pile of prepper shit. In general, I just kind of tuck stuff out of the way. And I really, other than that one shelf that was in the kitchen, and I think it was just because it was huge and it was just kind of in the kitchen, and that's where people tend to hang out. I think just, and I want to say it was like maybe 2 people ever commented on it. Almost no one. And I tried to pay attention to if people really looked at it or were sizing up or anything. And it just wasn't a thing. And I think there's a lot of things, I think, as preppers, we tend to think other people are seeing or focusing on more than they actually are. Like there's a whole, whether or not, how tactical a backpack is, or what color, not necessarily tactical, but the color of backpacks and things like that. And what they're made out of and all these other things, trying to be like super extra gray, which I'm a fan of gray as a concept. I like the color too. But as a concept, yes. But after having driven around in downtown a few times out of boredom, waiting on someone to get out of somewhere, out of an appointment, and I drove around just looking at the backpacks people were wearing, and most of them just weren't, like, most of them actually you could confuse for a tactical bag because of what they're made out of and the color and everything else. The point I'm taking the scenic route to get to here is, I think, again, often we overthink what people are paying attention to. So going back to the thing about the shelf, I had a similar shelf. It was almost the same shelf now that I think about it, that was also in that old house. And it was in my home office, which was basically just an extra bedroom that I claimed as my home office, and the ITRH studio. It had a similar shelf. The only difference there, of course, was I had an extra TV in that room. And so one shelf was taken up by the TV. And then the other shelves were just, I used fairly attractive, or like the most attractive opaque plastic tubs I could find with lids. And those I actually did label things other than what were actually in them. And that was it. And I labeled them boring things like computer cables. That was it. Now, this kind of brings me to the next thing here, which is try to make things look uninteresting. In the new house, we did a similar thing. But here the shelves are in the studio, like all the shelves are in the studio, which is really just a finished garage. And guests don't usually come in here, but if they do, some of the shelves just look like tools. Actually, there is one shelf that is just tools, but the bottom shelf is like a few of those same plastic tubs that made the trip over here. And then there's another shelf that really is my big giant shelf of prepper shit. And what I did was I put all of the stuff that looks most like camping gear in the front, again, because it's a very deep shelf, and I put all the other stuff towards the back. Things that were more apparent than others either went to the very top shelf or the very bottom shelf, depending on how much they weighed, because I was trying to be considerate and thinking through about my wife, who is maybe, and this is much debate in my home for weird reasons, she's about 5'1" and maybe 100, 110 pounds. And so for her to pull heavy things down off the shelf, it is not going to really work well. And then I have a really bad back. So for me, everything heavy really needs to be, I prefer it to be down on the bottom because, of course, I don't want to be laid up for a few days in bed because I threw my back out. Anyway, so they're just kind of tucked out of the way. There's a second, and again, it's made to look like it's just a big shelf of camping stuff. And let's face it, a lot of prepper shit could be very easily confused simply for camping stuff because, well, that's what it is. So again, thoughts there. Now there is another shelf in here, and this shelf does have more obvious stuff on it. And what I've done with that is at one point I had bought a dozen moving blankets because that's how I dampened the sound in the Rabbit Hole studio. I have not put them up in this space, and so you may, for the audio nerds, you may hear a little bit more reverb since we moved houses, just because I haven't finished doing it. But some stuff I have done, and the point I'm trying to get to is I took these extra moving blankets that I really wasn't using for anything else, and I wrapped a shelf in the moving blanket, one on the front and one on the back. And that allowed me to put all kinds of stuff in there that there's just no way around what it is. And I put that stuff in there, and that hides it. In here, in this context, what that looks like is a sound barrier. And so again, it goes back to leading people to think something is either not interesting or something other than what it is. So yeah, the shelf just looks like a sound barrier. It kind of looks like a room divider. And that's it. Really, I mean, I think the other thing too is, in general, I just don't let guests in here. And if I'm not home and my wife has girlfriends over that don't know that we're into this, preparedness lifestyle, then she just shuts the door to my office. Or if she opens it again, and since it's all kind of tucked away, it's just not that big of a deal. But anyway, let's see. There was something else I wanted to add to this. Oh, honestly, Pinterest is probably going to be a really great place a really great resource, excuse me, for home organization ideas. And I've got a secret addiction to Pinterest. I've got to admit, not for home organization ideas. I use it for other stuff. And I've had a few people tease me about that and call me girly for that. But I really like Pinterest. To me, it was like doing design and vision boards from when I was doing a lot of work in the design world and also in architecture. That's how we would think through a lot of things and come up with concepts. So for me, Pinterest is a very natural thing. I use it now for all kinds of stuff, including even gun stuff. Like I see some cool gun thing that I want to remember, and it's easier for me to have a visual representation rather than a bookmark. I'll put it in there. Anyway, I'm going to stop over justifying my obsession with Pinterest. I have dug around and just in general using Pinterest and looking around, I do know that there is a huge thing on there for home organization type stuff that may give you some great ideas for making the organization of your preps attractive in a way that kind of distracts people from what it actually is, or just flat out hiding it. So that's probably a really good thought. Anyway, and then a final note on this is almost everyone has space limitations. I know this question was focused on small apartments, and that's a thing a lot of preppers really wrestle with. So there's also the point at which you just have to realize you just don't have that much space, and you have to balance that out. Unfortunately, none of us live in a perfect world, but I think there's, with some digging around on Pinterest and some other things and just some different ways of looking at how you're looking at the situation, I think you'll come up with some cool ideas, and I think you'll be able to do what's good enough for you in your situation. Moving on to the next one, RK asks, how can we get CERT certified? For those that don't know, CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. It is put on by Fema. I will admit that there is going to be a bit of a rant that's going to happen here. But anyway, the first part is, if you Google it, the website will come up. Somewhere on their site, they will have a link for how you can find CERT going on, or CERT classes going on in your area. You'll have to dig for the link a little bit. Once you find the link and you go to your area's website, they're usually broken up by counties and parishes. You'll then have to dig a little bit more to actually find something that explains where the classes in your area are and how to sign up for them. And you're probably already hearing a little bit of my aggravation with CERT in general. But anyway, so some areas' specific websites are going to be better than others. Like the California stuff, they're a little more, oddly enough, for California, because part of it is that's where it started and they're more serious about it. But their websites tend to, because I've noodled around with it, much better. Easier to find stuff, easier to sign up for things. They just seem to really have their act together. Most of the aggravation you're hearing from me, and RK, this applies to you, is Harris County is just, it's just goofy. Let me preface this. Now, I really like CERT. I really like what they do. I believe in them, the mission, all that stuff. But for Bunny's sake, they often seem like they go out of their way to make it difficult for people to find the classes and sign up. And I was aggravated about this personally, and I'm aggravated because every time someone asks me about CERT, because we've done a lot to try to say, we think CERT is great, people should go get involved in CERT. Immediately within a week or two, they're, how do I find the damn class? I went and I dug it. And it is just like, so it really does often feel like it's just, it's such a flippin' pain in the ass to deal with. Harris County, where I live and where the person asking this question lives, really, it's just bad. And they've gotten sideways with me for saying this, which I think also speaks volumes to part of the problem here is that they can't even take constructive criticism. They take everything that is not gushing over them as blasphemy. And I really wish they'd grow the hell up and get thicker skins and manage the whole thing better, because it is really awesome and what they teach is really important and their mission is important. But hey, whatever. It's not my camel. The classes are still very much worth taking, and the ideals behind it all is very much worth getting involved in. Going beyond that, the details, the course itself is about 8 weeks long, with one class a day for a week. And if I remember correctly, those classes are 8 hours long, and they're all pretty interesting. It's not going to turn you into Jason Bourne. I think that's actually, I've said that repeatedly, and that's one of the things they get upset with me about. And I say that because a lot of people walk into it thinking that they are going to walk out of this like, I don't know, some like super highly trained rescue worker. And that's not marketing on their part. It's just people read into what they do as what they want and what they wish happened. But honestly, after I went through it, it is, at the time that you're taking it, it is the right level of education. Unless you already are a trained rescue worker, what they offer is the right level of education in the topic. It's not going to be this big, huge thing. You're not going to be, again, Jason Bourne. By the time you get done with this, you're just going to be hopefully an effective and productive member of a community emergency response team, which is the point to all of it. Anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox and stop complaining about them, but I think they do a great job. I think people should get involved with them in the areas that they are available. I have also heard that they are not available in all areas. Moving on, MG asked, after November 8th, what will run out quicker, canned goods or bullets? My answer is neither. It is actually magazines, followed by bullets or ARs. That's my prediction. Magazines almost always go first. And I think part of that is because magazines are cheaper in general than buying a box of bullets. And then you just have people who have never bought an AR before, or they own an AR and they're like, well, now is the time to go. Like, they finally get off their butt and go do it because it's going to go away. For a little over a decade now, I have watched stuff like this specifically because I wanted to know what runs out first and in what order do things run out. And for the most part, off the top of my head, I could actually tell you what bullet calibers go and in what order they go away, and what one rifle caliber will pretty much stick around and is an odd caliber that, like, you'd think more people would buy it up, but no, not really. It's actually 270. That, like, when all other rifle calibers are out, that's the one that sticks around for the longest. Anyway, it's been my observation that food is the second to the last thing people think about when they get worked up. Water, again, is either totally ignored or the very last thing. I was just reading an article earlier, and I cannot remember. I think I pulled it off Drudge or something. And it basically was an article about how the larger distributors of things like Wise, and there's a few other food storage brands, are all saying, like, they're selling triple this year what they were the last time. There was some sort of big thing that wound people up, and somebody else said that there was another company, I can't remember. But basically, all of them were saying their sales were up and up a lot. That doesn't surprise me. But they were all very much prepper brands, and they were all very much, all of the people talking about it were coming from prepper websites. So I don't think you're not at a point with food where there's a big issue with it. But I think if things get dicey after the election, which I think they might get a little dicey, I'm not expecting anything massive. I think if Trump wins, there is going to be some serious rioting in some areas and just bullshit. I think if Clinton wins, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are more conservative who have talked a lot of shit that nothing's going to happen. I think most of them tend to be more, in general, sensible people who are just angry and are not the types to go flip over cars, because I've never seen that riot happen. I've always seen a riot happen for the more liberal side of things. They don't like something, so it must go away. So that's my experience, my observation of stuff over time. I want to address something else here. Someone else asked me about, and it relates to this. There was a post on Survival Blog about ammo and magazine purchasing strategies following the election. I'll link to this article today. I think it was a good article. It was a well-considered piece. It had some good advice about the order to buy things in and the order to buy the kinds of companies to buy from and with them in what order. An example would be buying them online and then buying them from mail order places that don't have a shopping cart system. I don't know that those places really exist anymore, but I guess maybe they do. And so I thought that was interesting. I wasn't going to go look it up and dig around for it, but I thought it was interesting and I thought it was well written. Anyway, my only issue with the article is that it completely left out any sort of real caution. There was some 3 words that basically were like, okay, hold on, don't get too excited or something like that. But that was it over what was probably about a 1,500 word piece. I think maybe saying something like, hey, don't go spend your entire life savings on guns and gun food just because you're worried about what's happening after election. And my other thought I was left with was really just to say, like, hey, if you were going to be buying all of this stuff, you should not be buying it when you're freaked out, right? It's kind of like going to the grocery store when you haven't eaten all day. Like, that just usually doesn't work out well. You buy crap you don't need, crap you didn't actually want once you get home and are fed and everything else like that. I think the time to buy guns, bullets, and magazines and any of that stuff is never when you're freaked out. That really should be part of your prepper every month or every year purchasing that you do. I think it is a terrible idea to rush out and go buy things when you're freaked out. I will not be buying anything out of the ordinary personally, or us. I'll say us as a household, since I'm a married man. Us as a household will not be purchasing anything out of the ordinary, whether or not, regardless of who wins. Like, it ain't going to change the temperature of anything going on around here. I may be a little more or less concerned for our country, but overall, I've already kind of voiced my opinions on this election. And yes, my advice based off of what I read was, I think everybody should take a deep breath and not freak the hell out. Next one. RH, I'm legally blind. I can see, but not to any great distance, and was wondering what you would recommend for home defense. Love the show. Your intros crack me up. RH, thank you for the good words about the show. And I do want to add in, and I already said this to him on Facebook, but I do want to add in, I was actually considering getting rid of the intros where I make a goofy statement about something that the show survived. So, but I was really toying with getting rid of them. But I guess I'll keep them now because somebody says they like them. First person ever really say they like them. So actually, I think maybe more than one person. But anyway, so RH, thank you. They'll stay. The actual questions you've asked here, I'm going to try to get a hold of someone who can answer this better than I can, or at least I think there's 2 people I'm thinking of that I think may be able to answer this, come up with something better than I am. And I think part of this is I've had perfect eyesight my whole life. I'm now in my 40s and still don't find the need for even readers. So this isn't something I've spent much time thinking about. But here's what I can say. You said you can't see great distances, and you asked about home defense. So taking those 2 things together, unless you live in Buckingham Palace or Versailles or the Taj Mahal, I'm not hearing where your eyesight would impact all that much in this exact scenario. I could be wrong, and you might not have added in that you see really poorly within about, 15 yards or something too. And I guess the question there would be, and this is where I would actually need more detail to really do this justice. If within 15 meters you can't do good target, identification, and by target identification, I mean, if a total stranger was standing 15 meters from you and a family member of similar height, weight, ethnicity, all that stuff was standing next to them, if you at 15 meters could not tell the difference between those 2 human beings easily, that is a different situation. But that's not what I was reading here, that you're talking about that kind of eyesight. You're talking about you have a hard time far away. Anyway, I'm really trying to be careful with what I'm telling you here. And I just want to say, like, if that is the issue, like, I need you to let me know that, follow up with me about that so that I can get you the exact advice you really need. But from what you've told me, I'm going to go with the classics here, and but there are drawbacks to both. So first, a 12 or 20 gauge shotgun at the minimum barrel length, so that helps with maneuverability in a home. You still have to aim, but you have a larger spread than you will with a handgun or a rifle, obviously. So that may be helpful to you. So you could be a little off and you'd still probably be okay. I'd load it with a low recoil double-aught. I wouldn't do 3-inch magnum loads or anything like that indoors. I think it would be totally unnecessary. And I think the majority of manufacturers make them. I've got Winchester. I think I may also have some Hornady. I've shot them both. I haven't noticed a big difference between the two. I think, and why I bought one over the other, I think it was just one was on sale and then the next one was on sale, and they happened to be on sale when I was in the mood for buying 12 gauge ammo. And well, that was that. That's kind of how I settled on that. I don't think there's that big of a difference between them. I'm sure there's a blog post somewhere that has a much more in-depth and opinionated view of it than I do. But to me, that's that. Downside. You have a longer barrel, and someone can grab a hold of that as you come around a corner, and it's just maneuverability and operating any kind of long gun indoors is problematic for those reasons. You're telegraphing your position almost no matter what you do, unless you get into doing like lots of tactical ninjutsu type things. And yeah, you can do them and you can practice them a lot. You're still going to run into issues. The other issue is you can't hold a flashlight with one hand while you hold a shotgun with the other hand. It's not going to work. Why is this a problem? You're left with only a weapon-mounted light, which means anything you put light on, you are also pointing your weapon at. Remember, we only point guns at things we are okay with destroying, or sort of okay with destroying. The family pet, not so okay with destroying. Family members, not so okay with destroying. And so that's where the problem with weapon-mounted lights comes in. The next part is, or I guess the next option is a handgun you are comfortable and competent with. So this, with training and practice, gets rid of the barrel telegraph issue. It also allows you to do both a weapon-mounted light and have one in your hand. This is how I roll when things go bump in the night. And just in general, if we're doing any kind of practice stuff or whatever. Two more things. These are almost more important things to consider than the weapon. Actually, they may actually be, now that I think about it, more important than the weapon itself. Find a trainer in your area. Explain your situation, what you're trying to accomplish exactly, the scenario you are concerned about, and get trained specifically for that. 2, if you find yourself in this situation, I mean, this goes for everybody, but if you find yourself in this situation where the need for home defense arises, your first course of action should be to get everyone in the home into one room, lock the door, and call the cops. Our house has the bedrooms sectioned off from the rest of the house. And so there's just one doorway to a hallway that leads to the bedrooms themselves. So, which is one of the reasons why I was like, ooh, I really like this house. So when I say I grab my gun and my light, If I hear noise at night, I will go to that hallway door and peek around and kind of look in. If I see any, like, what's going on here. If I were to hear glass, I'm not going out there. And I don't think anyone else should either. I would lock the bedroom door. I would hit the panic button on the alarm. And I would sit tight with a gun and a light in hand until the police show up. I do want to acknowledge my desire would be to go out there and shoot somebody in the face. But the best thing is actually to lock it down and call the police. Anyway, I hope you all have enjoyed the show. Again, if you want to do more listener question shows, send me your questions at questions at intherabbithole.com. And we will probably start doing listener question shows once a month. I do want to acknowledge one last thing. I know it's kind of babbling and stumbling today. You'll have to excuse me. I got a lot going on lately, and I've had a lot of caffeine today, which tends to make me babble and jump around a bit more. But hopefully, y'all got a lot out of the show today. Show notes, links, and resources for this episode can be found at intherabbithole.com/E194. Find out about membership benefits and how you can help keep the lights on. Visit itrh.net. Again, that's itrh.net to find out about the cool Armada membership benefits and how you can be part of what keeps this show around. With that, we wrap up episode number 194 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.